So today I would like to talk about the simplicity of non-duality, actually. Because there's a kind of mistake that some people do when they try to become, or when they try to realize consciousness. And all I want to say is consciousness doesn't feel like a subject. You see? But some teachers advise you to become the subject, and then some people follow that advice and then they feel like, okay, I'm the subject now. But what now? It doesn't feel like I'm free. So that's what this video is for. For example, if you are suffering because of your thoughts or because of your feelings, some teachers give you the advice that you should become the detached witness that is apart from thoughts. And it feels like you are a little point of awareness inside of your head. And it feels like you're identified with this position, and you're looking at those thoughts, floating by. From this perspective, you watch your feelings, but you're not your feelings. And this little point of awareness doesn't think really. It is even more subtle than the spiritual ego, because the spiritual ego isn't really silent. The spiritual ego is still a voice in the head that says, I can watch my thoughts. But there's something more subtle, a kind of awareness that is really silent, but it is still aware, and it takes a subtle amount of effort to stay as that kind of awareness that is inside of the skull. And it says, I want to stay here, I want to maintain this position, I'm scared that I could fall back into the content of awareness. So it's like its main mission is to stay detached. So and it's silent actually, but there's still a feeling of you have to maintain this position where you're like this witness from back here. So and many teachers give this advice, but this is not consciousness. You see, you don't have to maintain consciousness. When you give up this position, which is not something you do with a new kind of effort, but you simply stop all efforts. Simply stop all the efforts. Imagine you just drop everything. Aren't you then just naturally aware still? You cannot lose awareness. You cannot lose the consciousness. As soon as you are no longer maintaining this position of the witness, then you give up all efforts, and you notice that there is still an awareness, but this awareness doesn't feel like it's in the head. Actually, as soon as you're looking for the awareness, you create again a position from where you look, and then you say, oh, I'm here looking and trying to find myself. I cannot really find myself, but because I'm looking for myself, I feel like I'm here. I'm the one that's looking. This creates the duality again. But as soon as you stop looking and you relax all of your efforts, then you cannot find yourself again. As soon as you try to find yourself again, you have to reinvent the position from where you are trying to find yourself, and therefore you can say, I feel like I'm here because I'm the one that's looking. So give up all the efforts, and there is just this open space. As soon as you reinvent someone who's trying to find out if this space is infinite or finite, you are again creating a sense of duality of someone who's trying to look. But even if you do that, that's not wrong. It's just something that appears in that infinite awareness. If you want to call it infinite, it doesn't really matter. So give up all efforts. And what about the thoughts? Some people are scared because they feel like, oh no, I'm getting identified again with my feelings and thoughts, and I shouldn't do that. But that's not really identification. You see, that's when you really start to grasp what it means to be the ocean in which all the thoughts and feelings are allowed to appear in. You can do that right now if you want to. Just give up all efforts. You are the awareness already. And notice how when you are not putting in effort to observe as a separate subject, observer, that there is just no effort. I actually forgot what I wanted to say. I'm still a bit tired. So, but yeah, it's really that simple. It really doesn't need such a big kind of explanation. It's just, really relax. You are free, not because you are free from thoughts, but you are so free that thoughts are allowed. You see, there's no separate entity that feels attacked by the appearance of thoughts. There can still be an appearance of feeling attacked, but also that doesn't happen to the center in the head. Which means there is no conflict inside of you. Which is the very thing that causes regulation and harmony. Because as if there are two entities inside here, and there's conflict. When there's just one, which isn't really an entity, but it's just the appearances, it's like they are allowed. But as soon as there's like a separate entity in here, there's conflict. You see? Relaxing all mental efforts takes away that separate entity. It requires effort to invent a separate self. So if you try to use practice as a method to try and get rid of your ego, you are actually strengthening the ego. So this doesn't feel like you are disidentified, because to feel like I'm no longer identified, it is, you still have to be a kind of separate self that knows that it's disidentified, because the separate witness feels like I can see my thoughts and therefore I know that I'm not the thoughts, so I feel like I'm disidentified, I'm doing it right. You see? When you're just a pure awareness, there's nobody left that knows if it's identified or not, because there's just pure disidentification. There is no entity left that could like register or say that or know that it's disidentified. There is just simply no identification for no one. See? And it's really simple. All I'm saying is relax your effort. If you put in effort to get rid of your ego, you're strengthening your ego. And you don't really get rid of it in a way. You don't get rid of the functioning I. You just see that it's not you. You still need a certain function of an I, because this body needs to do things, You're simply free of it. That's all. Also, if you put your awareness on your breath, which is conventionally considered as meditation, but you can do it if you want to. You just have to know that it's not the thing that will dissolve your ego. You can have certain experiences of stillness, but they are a product of the effort of the ego, and then the ego afterwards can say, I did it. And now you have to repeat this experience again and again and again. It becomes a new drug. And then when you're done with that kind of meditation, the ego is back again. You're identified again. You're the one that was aware of the breath. There's this awareness that resides in the skull that then stretches its attention with its will towards the breath. It's just an act of will. And when there is a will, there is an ego. When you give up all the will, the chattering of the mind can still remain. But there is a kind of a space in which it just happens, and there is no separate self that feels attacked by those thoughts. There is just no separate self that is kind of in conflict with the appearances. It doesn't feel like you are in the skull looking at things, but when there is a perception, there's a direct perception naturally. naturally a direct perception of what is, and there's not a sense of me being here. Of course the perspective is still there, but it's just a direct perception. And what's interesting about it is actually that this creates peace. It's not just a recognition in which everything is just allowed to be and that's it then. It actually harmonizes. I'm not sure what happens scientifically or neurologically in the brain. I'm not really sure. I can just say from my experience that apparently there must be something happening in the brain, because it's like the mind comes into like a state of being harmonious. And I guess that's just because there's no part of the mind that's trying to dominate the other part of the mind. So therefore it's like free to find its own way to find peace. It's like when the waters become still, because there's no entity that's disturbing it. And that's the real meditation. The meditation in which, I think this is important to say, it's the kind of meditation in which there is no will, because we are meditating to bring an end to our fears and conditionings. If there is a will in meditation, that will is a product of the conditioning, of the very conditioning that you're trying to get rid of. So the only part of your meditation that is still coming from will is the part where you sit down, but everything afterwards, it shouldn't be a part of your will. You see? So the only way you can overcome the conditioning is by directly, radically enter into a state where there is no conditioning, which doesn't mean that you immediately let go of all thoughts. You cannot do that. But the will, the controller, falls away, because that is the very entity that maintains and feeds the conditioning. Because there's the conditioning and there's the conditioned entity. When the conditioned entity falls away, the movement of the conditioning can still move, because there is a momentum. But because the conditioned entity is no longer there, it doesn't have very much power. So meditation, real meditation, can only be something in which there is absolutely no movement that comes from conditioning. Every newborn baby knows how to meditate, but the newborn baby doesn't know how to focus its attention onto the breath. Because in order to do that, you have to hear from someone, from somewhere, that you can do that. And that there is like a prize on the other side. You see? Alright, I think that's it. Have a great day.